Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Tales of the Bizarre Season 3 Part 2. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The 16th story begins with Nakayama witnessing a car accident while waiting at a red light. To his surprise, after the two drivers got out and glanced at their cars, they walked straight up to Nakayama, claiming it was his fault they had crashed. Nakayama was bewildered. He had just been standing there smoking a cigarette. How could it possibly be his fault? Unsure how to argue, he took the opportunity to flee the moment one of the men went to find the police. He ran for several blocks before finally shaking the driver. Later, Nakayama went to a coffee shop to calm his nerves. He was startled by the sound of a cup shattering on the floor. When he turned to look, he found two women staring at him with resentment. Fortunately, the section chief he was waiting for arrived at that moment. But as he left, the waitress shot him a disdainful look. Afterward, the section chief took Nakayama to a meeting with a client. However, the client kept staring at Nakayama, eventually stating that he had lost at the horse races the previous night and that it was all Nakayama's fault. Nakayama was baffled by how the old man could blame him for that. Before he could object, the section chief agreed that it was Nakayama's fault and intended to make him apologize. The client, however, was clearly upset and stormed out, causing the deal to fall through. Naturally, the section chief blamed the entire failure on Nakayama. As he was leaving the hotel, two police officers approached Nakayama. The two taxi drivers had filed a report, claiming the accident was entirely his fault. Nakayama tried to explain, but the police stopped him, saying he could tell it to the judge, and attempted to take him into custody. Feeling wronged, Nakayama seized a chance to escape. His escape was not smooth. While hiding from the police behind a trash can, he was blamed by a nearby dog. He had no choice but to keep running. He passed two girls who stopped him, insisting it was his fault they had failed to win a prize at the claw machine. While he argued with them, a chef from a neighboring restaurant confronted him, claiming it was Nakayama's fault his restaurant was empty and demanding compensation. Just then, seeing the police catching up, Nakayama stopped arguing and continued his flight. He ran without looking, bumping into a fortune teller who immediately grabbed him and told the woman he was serving that her husband's affair was all Nakayama's fault. He kept running, constantly being blamed, as the mob of people chasing him grew larger and larger. Much later, Nakayama finally managed to lose the crowd and rested in a park. He had barely sat down when a child next to him dropped his ice cream, and that too was his fault. Faced with the mother's angry glare, Nakayama had no choice but to get up and leave. But after that, no matter who he met or what happened, it was always his fault. Finally, with no other options, Nakayama went to an empty rooftop as night began to fall. He couldn't understand why this was happening to him. As he brooded, he noticed a woman preparing to jump. Nakayama immediately rushed over to dissuade her, telling her it would be painful, that death was not an escape, and that she should live optimistically no matter what. His words were not only useless, but earned him a scolding from the girl, who retorted that it was all his fault anyway. Stunned that this too was his fault, Nakayama decided to leave her be and go home. However, as soon as he reached his door, he was surrounded by a large crowd, including those who had chased him during the day and some new faces. Their purpose was the same, to blame Nakayama for everything. A woman blamed him for her missing child, and a man blamed him for his bankruptcy. With no way out, Nakayama ran into his home and locked the door. Much later, when the police used a spare key to open the door, they found Nakayama dead like a piece of shit. The noise of their discussion woke up Nakayama's next-door neighbor, and so the crowd turned and placed all the blame on him instead. The 17th story begins with Kitani as a manager at a company. Recently, he was tasked with selecting a female brand ambassador. From many candidates, he chose 4 who had a good image and presented them to the department head for the final decision. After looking at the photos, the department head picked a young actress, saying she was his type. He wanted to meet her that night and tasked Kitani with arranging it. Faced with the department head's eagerness, Kitani reluctantly complied. It was common knowledge in the company that the department head was a lecher. It didn't take a genius to figure out his intentions for a private evening meeting. Kitani struggled with how to broach the subject with the young woman. Lost in thought, he was careless and got into a car accident. Lying in a hospital bed, Kitani was thankful he had only suffered a mild concussion. If he had died, it would have all been for nothing. Just then, the department head burst in. Kitani was surprised, wondering what he had done to deserve such an urgent visit. After a few words of concern, the department head's true motive was revealed. He was worried that if Kitani had died, there would be no one to contact the actress for him. Understanding this, Kitani immediately assured him that he would take care of everything. Seeing his subordinate's perceptiveness, the department head promised to promote him to division manager after the matter was settled. Kitani, full of gratitude, promised to handle it well. As the department head was leaving, Kitani wondered if the promotion was really guaranteed. Unexpectedly, the department head seemed to read his mind, turning back to tell him to leave it to him. Although Kitani didn't know how his boss had read his thoughts, he was determined to get the job done for the promotion. A few days later, Kitani was discharged from the hospital. The project proceeded smoothly, and he was just one step away from the division manager position. His colleagues came to congratulate him, saying they had heard he would be promoted if the campaign was a success. Kitani thought to himself that letting the lecherous boss sleep with the actress was a small price to pay for such a reward. He had only thought this, but his two colleagues in front of him heard it. They quickly shushed him, advising that even though everyone knew about it, he shouldn't say it out loud, as the department head still had a reputation to maintain. Realizing his thoughts could be heard, Kitani was so shocked he immediately got up and left. Out on the street, he saw a beautiful woman and thought her figure was irresistible and must have tempted many men. To his shock, the woman heard his thought and slapped him across the face. After this ordeal, Kitani finally understood his condition. His thoughts were being broadcast for others to hear. Just then, his department head arrived and gave him a great opportunity, announcing that Kitani would preside over the next day's meeting. For Kitani, this was a rare chance to make an impression on the top executives. However, the next morning, Kitani overslept. By the time he rushed to the company, the meeting had already been moved up, and everyone was waiting for him. He entered the conference room, nervous and anxious. Before the meeting officially began, the department head gave a short speech. During this, Kitani, worried about his stray thoughts offending the leadership, tried to control his mind by repeating, "The boss is right, that's exactly right." But he soon lost control, thinking that the introduction was taking too long and that his boss should just let him get on with his presentation. The executives heard this and were stunned, thinking he was incredibly rude. The department head was also mortified, hearing Kitani's thought that he was dragging things out. He was furious and would have throttled Kitani if the other leaders weren't present. He had no choice but to quickly wrap up his speech. Finally, it was Kitani's turn. As he walked up, he tripped and fell. Despite the clumsy start, he quickly recovered. He was indeed very competent in his field, delivering a presentation that was both lively and humorous. He figured that as long as he kept talking, he wouldn't have stray thoughts and wouldn't leave a bad impression. He introduced the actress, explaining that she was chosen for her outstanding performance, but then secretly thought that the real reason was that the department head wanted to sleep with her. The department head broke out in a sweat as Kitani tried to cover his tracks, only making things more chaotic. Soon, his presentation was over, met with dead silence. He felt his life was about to fall apart. He continued speaking, but the more he said, the more he thought, and the more mistakes he made. Suddenly, an executive interrupted with a question. Kitani couldn't help but think what an idiot the man was for speaking without thinking things through. Unexpectedly, the company president burst out laughing. Kitani's frankness had won him over. The president declared that the company needed more straightforward people like him. The president's laughter broke the awkward tension in the room. However, Kitani began to think wildly again, musing that the president's laugh made him look like a bald moron who only got the job because he was the former chairman's son-in-law. At that moment, Kitani knew his career was completely and utterly doomed. The 18th story begins with a man having a beautiful and loving girlfriend named Reiko. Every Sunday, Reiko would come to the man's place to help him clean. Of course, we can only guess what other activities might have followed the cleaning. One day, while trying to cook for the man, Reiko found that the rice cooker wasn't working. The man suggested she check if it was plugged in. Seeing that it wasn't, Reiko smiled, picked up the plug, and went to insert it into the socket. The next moment, the power in the apartment went out. The man called out Reiko's name, but there was no response. When he turned around, he saw her lying on the floor. At first, the man didn't understand what had happened, but when he saw the wisp of smoke rising from her hand, he realized Reiko was gone. 6 months passed after Reiko's death. Strangely, in those 6 months, the man's luck had turned for the better. Whenever it involved electronics, he was guaranteed to win any prize. His friends would often rub up against him, jokingly hoping to absorb some of his good luck. Of course, this was mostly in jest, as their main goal was to cheer the man up and help him move on from his grief. Meanwhile, a girl named Mickey watched the man from afar. She had liked him for a long time, but the man was still stuck on Reiko and couldn't move on. Sometimes, Mickey truly envied Reiko for being able to occupy the man's heart so completely. That evening, the man was persuaded by his friends to attend a social gathering, where Mickey was also present. When Mickey finally mustered the courage to ask the man for a drink, he immediately made an excuse and left. His actions put a damper on the party, but everyone understood why. Someone remarked that it was Reiko's own fault for plugging in an appliance with wet hands. The moment they mentioned Reiko, the air conditioner suddenly changed modes, making the room much colder. Mickey didn't pay much attention as her focus was drawn to a lighter the man had left behind. She quickly grabbed it and chased after him. Using the lighter as an excuse, she successfully got close to the man. Since she had brought him his lighter, the man couldn't just send her away, and the two ended up walking together under the moonlight. During their walk, Mickey once again brought up Reiko, asking if he still couldn't forget her. The man admitted that he wanted to forget her quickly, but he always felt her presence around him. After saying this, the man prepared to leave. Mickey quickly called out to him, saying she would wait for the day he was finally over Reiko. The moment after Mickey's confession, the streetlights suddenly went out. In the darkness, Mickey lost her footing and fell down a flight of stairs, getting seriously injured. Then, the streetlights turned back on by themselves. Feeling responsible, the man took Mickey back to his apartment to bandage her wounds. But then something strange happened. The lights in his apartment also went out and wouldn't turn on. Mickey suddenly remarked that Reiko had died in this very room. The man told her to stop talking about Reiko. The next moment, the television switched on by itself, and a ghostly image of Reiko appeared on the screen. The man stared in disbelief because Reiko had died 6 months ago. As soon as he said this, the lights in the room began to flicker on and off. It became terrifyingly clear that they were dealing with a ghost. Remembering the cause of Reiko's death, the man wondered if Reiko's ghost possessed the electrical appliances. Mickey dismissed it as a hallucination and grabbed the remote to turn off the TV. This action seemed to enrage Reiko. The stereo system blared to life and glass cups shattered on their own. Terrified, the man and Mickey fled the apartment. They ran out into the street, but the streetlights were being controlled by Reiko. They had no choice but to run further away. Eventually, they found themselves in a construction site, but there were even more electrical wires here, so many that Reiko was able to manifest her image. She spoke to them through a loudspeaker, saying she was still alive. From the day she was electrocuted, she had been living inside the electronics, always by the man's side, taking care of him. It turned out the man's good luck wasn't luck at all. It was Reiko silently looking after him. But now, he was trying to forget her and move on with Mickey. Reiko couldn't accept this and intended to kill him. During the struggle, they discovered that a large battery could drain the electricity Reiko was using. But when Mickey picked up the battery to try to fend Reiko off, it proved futile, and she was electrocuted and knocked unconscious. The man rushed to her side and was relieved to find she wasn't seriously hurt. However, what Mickey said next sent a chill down his spine all the way to his smelly butt. It was Reiko speaking through her. It turned out Reiko had possessed Mickey's body, while Mickey's spirit had been sucked into the battery. The 19th story begins with Ken being a very meticulous person. This was evident even in how he handled his trash, carefully separating combustibles from non-combustibles. But while others are strict with themselves and lenient with others, Ken was strict with everyone. For example, he stopped a female neighbor to tell her that Wednesday was the day for non-combustible trash. At work, Ken was just as rigorous, pointing out a subordinate's typos, missing words, and grammatical errors, and telling him to redo the report. He also remarked that the subordinate's clothes were dirty and that he should pay attention to his appearance. Ken's actions made his subordinate resentful and a target of ridicule, but Ken didn't care. Instead, he warned them to be more serious during work hours, because being sloppy could get someone killed. While eating noodles, Ken was annoyed by the man at his table blowing smoke. When his noodles arrived, he was displeased that the waiter had brought the wrong order and made them remake it. That evening, while entertaining a client with his boss, the client tried to ease the stiff atmosphere by saying there were no rules for the night. But Ken couldn't help himself and pointed out a minor mistake. His boss explained that Ken's flaw was being too serious. The client casually remarked that in this world, people who don't know how to be flexible can't handle great responsibilities. Everyone laughed, completely disregarding Ken's feelings. Later, Ken went to the restroom fuming. He felt everyone was too careless. If it weren't for business, he wouldn't want to spend another second there. But life was what it was. Ken composed himself and prepared to leave. When he opened the door, he was shocked to find that everything had changed. He saw his boss walk by and chased after him, asking where the client was and why the bar had suddenly turned into their office. The boss, confused, warned Ken to be careful, or he would be eliminated. Bewildered, he started to work. He saw the subordinate who had scorned him the day before now handing him a report with trembling hands. Though Ken didn't understand the situation, he meticulously reviewed the report and found the same mistakes as yesterday. When he pointed them out, the subordinate's face turned pale, and he broke into a cold sweat. Then, to Ken's horror, the subordinate pulled out a gun and killed himself. Ken was stunned, unable to understand what was happening. But bizarrely, his colleagues acted as if nothing had happened. His boss told him the disposal team would be there shortly. As if on cue, a team of armed men rushed in, expertly bagged the body and carried it away. The boss remarked that choosing suicide was wise, as he would have been eliminated sooner or later anyway. His boss's words left Ken deeply confused. At lunch, he went to the same restaurant. The same waiter served him, and once again, the order was wrong. Ken instinctively pointed it out. Unlike before, the waiter's expression turned to one of pure terror, as if a terrible fate awaited him. Sure enough, the owner came out, apologized to Ken, then pulled out a gun and shot the waiter on the spot. Ken was dumbfounded, wondering what had happened to this world and why everyone became so extreme. But no one could give him an answer. The next day was just as perplexing. In the morning, while taking out the trash, Ken saw people with instruments inspecting each bag. If any anomaly was found, an armed team would emerge from a nearby vehicle and eliminate the woman who had broken the rules. On his way to work, Ken witnessed many similar incidents. People who disobeyed traffic rules, violated ethical codes, or were even late for school were all eliminated by the disposal team. After seeing so many of these events, he became numb. But Ken understood that after opening that door, he had crossed over into a parallel universe where meticulousness was the ultimate value. People who were sloppy or not serious had no right to live. But having just arrived, he couldn't get used to seeing living people die before his eyes. So when he found minor mistakes in his subordinate's work, he chose to cover for him. However, after sending his subordinate away, he noticed his boss hadn't come in. When he asked, he learned that his boss had been eliminated for covering for a subordinate. Terrified, Ken called his subordinate back and pointed out the errors in his report. Just then, the disposal team arrived with guns and executed the subordinate. Realizing he had to adapt or be eliminated like his boss, Ken resolved to follow the rules of this world. That night, Ken went to a bar by himself. A beer instantly eased the tension of the past few days. The hostess beside him was exceptionally diligent, completely unlike her counterpart in the other world. Ken was enjoying himself and wanted another drink, but the woman advised him to stop, warning that losing his composure could get him eliminated. Annoyed, Ken accidentally dropped his glass. The sound drew everyone's attention. Ken panicked. If his clothes were disheveled, his life would be in danger. He decided to go to the restroom to tidy up. As he was about to leave, he realized the people in the bar had notified the disposal team. Terrified, Ken escaped through the bathroom window. He ran for a long time and finally eluded the team when a man approached him. The man led him to a basement. After giving a secret code, they entered. Inside were many people, men and women. The man explained it was a gathering and Ken was a new member. Here, there were no strict rules. Everyone could let loose. He saw people lounging on sofas in improper postures, eating and drinking with abandon. Encouraged by the man, Ken loosened his tie, took off his jacket, and put his feet up on the table without a shred of decorum. For the first time in a long while, Ken felt incredibly relaxed. But the next moment, an alarm blared. The disposal team had somehow found them. They burst in, shooting on sight. Terrified, Ken ran for his life. He opened door after door, ran through corridor after corridor, and when he came to his senses, he found himself back in the original bar. Confused, he asked his boss if they hadn't all been eliminated. His boss looked at him strangely and asked what nonsense he was talking about, saying they were worried because he had been in the restroom for so long. Hearing this, Ken realized he was finally back in his own world. He was thrilled. His boss just laughed, thinking he was drunk. Just then, a waitress accidentally spilled water on Ken. This time, instead of scolding her, Ken told her it was a small matter and then poured the entire glass over himself. Taking advantage of the lively mood, Ken then grabbed a bucket of ice and dumped it on the client's head. Now, he was in real trouble. The 20th story begins with June buying a new cell phone. After getting home from work, he decided to make his first call. But who to call? After some thought, he decided to call his own landline. The phone rang for a long time, but his home phone remained silent. Just as June was getting confused, someone answered. June quickly said he must have dialed the wrong number and hung up. His first thought was that he had made a mistake. He checked the time. The baseball game had already started. June quickly turned on the TV and settled on the sofa to watch. About 38 minutes later, his landline suddenly rang. June answered it, and the person on the other end said they must have the wrong number and quickly hung up. Putting down the phone, June grumbled but then froze. The words the caller had used were identical to what he had said earlier. To test his theory, June called the time service. The recording said the time was 8:54 p.m., but his clock clearly showed 8:16 p.m. Unsure, he immediately called his best friend and asked for the time. His friend said it was almost 9 o'clock. His friend was puzzled by the question, but June didn't have time to explain. He asked if the baseball game was still on and who had won the 9th inning. His friend quickly told him the result. Hearing his friend's excited tone, it was clear he was also a baseball fan. But June didn't care about that. He realized he had bought something extraordinary, a phone that could call 38 minutes into the future. June immediately shared this news with a girl he liked, but the girl seemed skeptical, or perhaps she just wasn't interested. She quickly left. June's best friend saw this and told him not to be a simp, saying she would never change no matter how hard he tried. By now, June wasn't listening to his friend. Staring at the horse racing section of the newspaper, he had a bold idea. It was a bit complicated and made his head spin, but for the sake of making money, he dialed his own home number. A few moments later, his future self answered. Without hesitating, June asked for the horse race results. The voice on the other end gave him the answer directly. June hesitantly placed a bet. A short while later, he discovered he had won. Excited, he rushed home. According to the rules, his past self would be calling him soon to ask for the results, and all he had to do was tell him. June got home at 2:10 p.m. and at 2:13 p.m. he received the call from his past self. He relayed the results and, with that, successfully earned his first big win. Over the next few days, June repeated this process, placing bigger and bigger bets, eventually making over $4 million. At this point, a new thought occurred to June. He wanted to know what would happen if he didn't tell his past self the answer. As he was thinking this, the call from the past came. June hesitated and didn't give the answer. The moment the race started, the money he had won vanished into thin air. He finally understood. He got the results from his future self and won, but if he didn't give the results to his past self, it was as if he had never won in the first place, and he would end up with nothing. His brain couldn't quite grasp why, but the $4 million lesson taught him to always follow the rules. Just then, his friend called, saying the manager was angry because he had missed several days of work. June, still fuming, told his friend to inform the manager that he quit. The girl he liked happened to overhear this. At 3 p.m. that day, June went to the betting office again, determined not to make the same mistake. He planned to win a huge amount of money this time. But when he called his future self, the voice on the other end urgently told him to leave the area, saying it was very dangerous there. Just as June got up to leave, a large truck came speeding around the corner and crashed into the exact spot where he had been sitting. If it weren't for his future self, he would be dead. Realizing this, he remembered the rule. He had to immediately pass this information on to his past self. But as June rushed home, he found the girl waiting for him downstairs. She said she was worried and had something important to tell him. But June, with his life on the line, brushed her aside and ran upstairs. He got to his apartment just in time. He accidentally turned on the TV and saw a news report about the accident. As he watched anxiously, the phone finally rang. He urged the person on the other end to leave that place immediately. But the caller wasn't his past self. It was the girl. Terrified, June demanded she hang up and not tie up the line. But the girl wouldn't listen, asking why he couldn't just hang up himself. Meanwhile, the past June had arrived at the location. When he tried to call himself, the line was busy. No one could warn him about the danger. And so he was hit by the truck and killed instantly. In the apartment, the present-day June, still yelling into the phone, vanished from the girl's sight, leaving only the unanswered call. The 21st story begins in a bar where a shady man told his innocent friend a story. He said that at a train station platform, people would often hear a cat meowing. Everyone would look around for it, and some would even lean over the platform to look down. When a station attendant saw this dangerous behavior, she put up a sign under the platform that read, "Even if you hear a cat, absolutely do not look down." The sign, intended as a warning, had the opposite effect, making even more people look down, curious as to why they shouldn't. One day, a tragedy occurred. A woman, distracted by the sign, didn't notice an approaching train and was killed. After she was gone, the people around her finally saw the meowing cat. It ran over and began to drink the woman's diabetic blood. The story was over, and the innocent friend was terrified. The shady man laughed at him and said he had an even scarier story called The Unlucky Legend. Anyone who heard this story had to tell it to 10 other people within 12 hours, or something terrible would happen to them. The shady man said he had a friend named Sato who had been tricked by a colleague at work into listening to the unlucky story. Sato was a very timid person. Learning that he would suffer a terrible fate if he didn't tell the story to 10 people by 8 a.m. the next morning, he was scared to death. When he got home, he first tried to tell his mother, but she was too busy to listen. He then went to his father, who found him annoying and walked away. He tried to tell his sister, but she was busy with her sexy body too. Defeated, Sato went to his room and started making calls. He must have called dozens of people. Most didn't answer or their lines were busy. The few who did pick up had already heard the legend. After all that effort, he had only managed to tell 2 people. Desperate, he called the girl he had a crush on and said he wanted to tell her an unlucky legend. She snapped back, asking if he was trying to make her unlucky, and told him to shut up before hanging up. With no friends left to call, Sato thought of calling the emergency number and directory assistance. Unsurprisingly, he was scolded by the police. With no other options, Sato went out to try his luck. He found a bar that was still open and went inside. After ordering a drink, he got on stage and said he wanted to tell a story before singing, but no one wanted to listen. They all got up and left. Facing the angry owner and his wife, Sato ended up telling them the story, and in return, they made him drink a lot. Now he only needed 6 more people. But Sato was so drunk he could barely walk. Stumbling down the street, he came across a group of bikers. Fueled by liquid courage, he tried to tell them the story. But before he could finish, they cut him off, saying it wasn't a very interesting story. They explained that one of their friends had died because of that legend, a truly gruesome death, and they wanted to know what Sato found so amusing about it. Then they beat him up. Bruised and battered, Sato staggered to a park and collapsed on a bench. When he woke up, it was 6 a.m. He had only 2 hours to tell the story to 6 more people. Sato got on a crowded train hoping to find his audience there, but he was kicked off before he could tell anyone. At the station, he saw a few helpful station attendants and managed to tell the story to 3 of them. 1 hour left, 3 people to go. Leaving the station, Sato found a homeless man. He paid him a few coins to listen to his story. Now, only 2 were left. Just then, he was stopped by a cult member. He agreed to let her pray for him in exchange for her listening to the story, guessing she would soon be telling it to others instead of praying. With only 1 person left, he set his sights on a young girl, but in his disheveled state, he looked like a creep. As he ran towards her, he was tackled and restrained by several people, who then took him to a police box. But it was almost 8 a.m. In a panic, Sato snatched a police officer's gun and tried to force him to listen to the story. But his actions made it impossible for the officer to listen. He just kept trying to calm Sato down. As the clock neared 8 a.m., another officer happened to pass by. Seeing Sato holding his colleague at gunpoint, he didn't hesitate. The second the clock struck 8 a.m., a gunshot rang out, and Sato was killed. It seems like this was the misfortune he was trying to avoid. After hearing the story, the friend felt sorry for Sato but was also curious, wondering what was the story Sato was trying to tell. The shady man smiled and said he had already told him. The story about Sato was indeed the unlucky legend, and the friend was the 9th person to hear it. The innocent friend asked if he was joking and if he only needed 1 more person to complete his task. The shady man said he had already completed it. It turns out the middle-aged man who had been secretly listening to their conversation at the next table was the 10th. This meant both of them now had 12 hours to tell the story to 10 more people. The middle-aged man looked up, completely baffled. The 22nd story begins with Kazumi running late while rushing to catch a flight one morning. He immediately called the client to explain, but the client told him it didn't matter anymore. Just moments before, the client's company had gone bankrupt due to massive debt. Because of his lateness, Kazumi had inadvertently saved his own company from a huge loss. Otherwise, the massive deal would have cost his boss everything he owned. Relieved, Kazumi then heard a broadcast announcement that a plane had caught fire after takeoff and crashed. It was the very plane he was supposed to be on. His luck was truly incredible. Back at the office, his colleagues buzzed with speculation that Kazumi was probably getting a promotion. Kazumi was secretly pleased but remained modest. Their conversation was overheard by the managing director, who then gave Kazumi an inside tip, saying his promotion to department head was practically a sure thing and would be officially decided at the next board meeting. That night, Kazumi treated his colleagues to a lavish dinner. One colleague remarked sourly how unfair life was, with all the good luck going to Kazumi. Just then, a client approached their table to greet Kazumi. Even at dinner, he was running into clients, and he managed to close a deal right there on the spot, a 1.05 billion contract. Kazumi's wife was stunned at how casually business was conducted these days and was filled with admiration for her husband. Kazumi's performance soared, and within a few days, he was officially the section chief. However, a new colleague joined the company. The man's luck was the polar opposite of Kazumi's. He was incredibly, supernaturally unlucky. His arrival marked the end of Kazumi's lucky streak. That day, Kazumi had a business meeting. Since everyone else was busy, he took the unlucky man with him. But when they got in the elevator, it malfunctioned. This was a rare occurrence for Kazumi, but for the unlucky man, it was just another day. Trapped, he told Kazumi why he had been transferred. He brought bad luck with him wherever he went. At first, Kazumi was skeptical, but by the time they finally got out of the elevator and reached the client's office, it was too late. The client, tired of waiting, had made a deal with someone else. Having learned his lesson, Kazumi was determined not to take the unlucky man on his next business trip. He left the unlucky man at the office, and this time, the meeting went exceptionally well. But just as they were about to sign the contract, a waiter informed Kazumi that he had a phone call. He went to take it and found it was the unlucky man, asking if it was time for him to go home. So the man was still at the office. When Kazumi returned, the client had changed his mind. The deal was off. Kazumi was furious but helpless. The next day, as he was heading home, the unlucky man insisted on tagging along, saying he must greet Kazumi's family. But his presence brought more trouble. Kazumi found a note from his wife saying she suddenly felt empty in their life together and had taken the children back to her parents' house. With the unlucky man sticking to him, Kazumi's luck completely vanished. He lost his newly acquired section chief position. In contrast, the man's luck seemed to improve slightly. A tea leaf in his cup even stood upright. For others, this might be normal, but for the unlucky man, it was a miracle. He was ecstatic and deeply grateful to Kazumi. It turned out that getting transferred there had been his idea. He had heard about Kazumi's luck and had hoped to one day work under him. Now that he was here, his constant misfortune had ceased. He was happy, but Kazumi was not. The unlucky man's arrival had cost him his family and career. He begged the man to leave and go plague someone else. Hurt, the unlucky man submitted his resignation the next day. Strangely, the moment Kazumi received the resignation letter, all his good luck returned. His wife and children came back, the lost contract was recovered, and his confidence was restored. Looking at the resignation letter, Kazumi felt a wave of emotions. The days with the unlucky man had been excruciating, but now he was gone. Kazumi believed that even without him, the unlucky man would be fine, just with a bit of bad luck. Just then, he heard the frantic sounds of nurses rushing a patient. He looked and saw that the person being rushed into surgery was the unlucky man. It seems like he is actually dying, but it had nothing to do with Kazumi. As Kazumi walked out of the hospital lost in thought, the unlucky man's condition in the operating room worsened. His heart monitor flatlined. Just as the doctors were about to give up, Kazumi turned back. At that moment, the unlucky man's heart monitor started beeping again. Kazumi sprinted back towards the operating room. In his haste, he crashed into a nurse and tumbled down a flight of stairs. Kazumi ended up with a broken leg, but the unlucky man miraculously survived and woke up. They were placed in the same hospital room. There, in front of the unlucky man, Kazumi tore up the resignation letter. Saving the unlucky man might mean losing his good luck forever, but in its place, he had gained a partner, a dear friend, and a loyal subordinate. The 23rd story begins with Misawa as a man who loved to drink water. He was addicted to it. He could skip a meal, but he couldn't go without water. Every day, Misawa carried a large water bottle and a cup, drinking wherever he went. If he had to speak, his consumption was even more impressive, requiring about 2 cups of water per sentence. This made for a very poor experience for the executives during his project proposal presentation. In the end, they chose the proposal from his rival. Misawa was furious but helpless. To make matters worse, he was assigned to supervise a construction site, which was essentially a form of exile. On his first day there, disaster struck. He was crushed under several steel plates, but then he realized it was just a dream. Startled, Misawa woke up and drank some water to calm himself. Determined not to lose to his rival, he stayed up all night working on a new proposal. The next day, however, his boss didn't even look at it. Instead, he handed Misawa a letter of appointment, informing him that a new office was opening in Okinawa and he would be transferred there. Misawa's heart sank. The thought made him even thirstier, craving more water. Just then, the sound of dripping water caught his attention. He saw water dripping onto a steel plate not far from him. He struggled to reach the droplet, but he was just out of reach. As his thirst became unbearable, he heard a voice. A worker was asking if he was still alive and telling him to hang on. Later, Misawa, still an avid water drinker, had another experience. He happened to see his girlfriend with his rival behind his back. Enraged, Misawa confronted her, and they broke up. Furious, Misawa chugged an entire bottle of water, but the more he drank, the thirstier he became, and then he woke up. He found himself still at the construction site. Being rescued was a fantasy. Drinking water was a fantasy. But in his extreme thirst, Misawa discovered he seemed to have superpowers. When he wanted to drink, the water droplet would float over to him. When he was done, it would return to its original spot. However, when he tried to move the steel plates pinning him down, they didn't budge an inch. But he did hear footsteps. It was the worker who had found him alive and was telling him to hang on. Rescued, Misawa lay in a hospital bed. His girlfriend came, crying and begging for his forgiveness, saying she was wrong to leave him. Misawa could only ask for some water. From that point on, his life began to go smoothly. His co-worker was no longer a rival to him, his colleagues were friendly, and his boss even promoted him to section chief. As everyone applauded him, as he was recognized by the leadership, and as his relationship with his girlfriend grew stronger, all Misawa wanted was a huge glass of water. Why was he still so obsessed with water? Misawa figured it must be a side effect of his superpowers. He could even control the speed of a toy car with his mind. Misawa woke up again. It was all another illusion. He was still trapped, not yet rescued. But even if it was a hallucination, Misawa was happy to be immersed in it. Such wonderful dreams were rare, and this happiness was something he had never possessed. He thought it would be fine to remain lost in this dream forever. But just as he had this thought, the worker discovered he was still alive and urged him to hang on. A group of people had found him, shattering his beautiful dream. Misawa was enraged. He didn't want to wake up. He didn't want to return to that world of failure and betrayal. So he used his superpower to loosen 2 screws, causing the steel plates to fall. Then, Misawa woke up yet again. Nothing had happened. There was no rescue, no superpowers. He was still lying there, dying of thirst. He wished his beautiful dream would never end. The 24th story begins with a man suffering from severe face blindness. He forgot a colleague from the personnel department. Not only did he not remember her, but in front of her fiancé, he remarked that she used to have cow eyes. A colleague was very upset, explaining that she had undergone significant plastic surgery, including getting double eyelids. She was surely hurt by his comment. Back home, the man was racked with guilt, blaming himself for his tactless remark. With a class reunion the next day, he worried he wouldn't recognize his classmates and asked his wife to get out his graduation photo. But it was a photo from his junior high graduation 25 years ago. He wondered if he could really recognize anyone from that. Unsurprisingly, when he arrived at the hotel the next day, he stood at the entrance and didn't see a single familiar face. Luckily, his classmates recognized him and greeted him warmly. To avoid awkwardness, the man asked his old classmates for their business cards. Looking at the lively scene at the table, he didn't recognize anyone. He suddenly felt that this reunion was rather meaningless. However, the woman sitting next to him suddenly greeted him and asked if he knew who she was. He couldn't say. It turned out to be his junior high crush. Looking at the graduation photo, she hadn't changed much. After the meal, a classmate suggested they go for a second round, but the man declined. He didn't see the point in hanging out with a group of strangers. But for someone with severe face blindness, he surprisingly recognized a person wrapped in bandages at a single glance. A colleague, seeing the man chatting warmly with him, asked who he was. They remarked that getting into an accident like that ironically made him easier to remember. Later, the man had to go to the archives department for some documents. When he got there, the staff member said his photo ID didn't look like him. The man insisted it was him, but the staff member refused to believe him. In the afternoon, back in his office, the man looked at his 2 busy colleagues with a blank expression. It seemed he could no longer even recognize them. Leaving work, he stood in front of a mirror on the street in silence. At that moment, the reflection staring back at him was that of a complete stranger. The 25th story begins with the news about a famous actress getting engaged. When Okuda saw the news, he was furious and tore up the newspaper. His friend tried to calm him down, saying it was just his favorite idol getting engaged. Okuda was offended by this. To him, this idol was his hope. his spiritual pillar. He had been following her since her debut, telling himself he was waiting for her. He planned to marry her one day when he won the lottery or made his fortune. But now someone else had beaten him to it. How could he not be angry? But his friend reminded him that his idol didn't even know he existed. That night, Okuda drank heavily. Staggering home, he stumbled upon a street artist. The time and place intrigued him, and he approached the artist, insisting on having his portrait drawn. The artist looked up, said nothing, and began to draw. A moment later, a lifelike sketch was complete. But it wasn't a portrait of Okuda. It was of a woman he didn't recognize. Confused, Okuda asked the artist why he had drawn this. The man remained silent, simply holding out his hand, clearly wanting payment. Not wanting to argue, Okuda paid and left. The next day at work, Okuda was still suffering from his hangover. Just then, the department head announced that 3 new employees had joined the company, 2 men and 1 woman. When Okuda looked at the woman, he was stunned. She looked exactly like the woman in the portrait. She introduced herself as Akiko. Strangely, Akiko had been staring at Okuda since she walked in. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but that evening after work, he happened to run into her. Akiko invited him to dinner, and seeing how attractive she was, he readily agreed. They had a wonderful meal, during which Akiko confessed that she had transferred to his department specifically because she had a crush on him. Blown away by the sudden confession from a beautiful woman, Okuda was overjoyed. That night, he intentionally walked past the spot where he had met the strange artist, but the man wasn't there. Okuda shrugged it off as a coincidence. 3 months passed. Akiko's beauty, competence, and humility had won the hearts of all the single men in the office. But by this time, she was already dating Okuda. One evening, Okuda passed by the artist's spot again, and this time he was there. Okuda wanted to ask him about the first portrait, but the man didn't answer. Instead, he quickly drew another portrait for Okuda. It was another beautiful woman he didn't recognize. Again, the artist forced him to pay. When Okuda tried to ask who this woman was, the artist remained silent. When Akiko saw the drawing, she thought Okuda was the artist and suggested they spend the weekend at his place. Just after talking with Akiko, Okuda was summoned to the managing director's office. As soon as he entered, he saw the woman from the new portrait. The director explained that she was his daughter, who had just returned from studying abroad. Although he didn't know how his daughter had learned about Okuda, she was his only precious child. Since she liked Okuda so much, he wouldn't stand in her way. As long as Okuda agreed to date his daughter, promotions and raises were guaranteed. The sudden turn of events left Okuda hesitating, not knowing whether he should choose Akiko or the director's daughter. Okuda suffered from severe indecisiveness and had no idea how to choose. That's when he thought of the strange artist. He figured that if the man was so powerful, he could surely help him choose the person most suitable for him. He rushed to the spot that night, but the artist wasn't there. Just as Okuda felt discouraged, the man appeared behind him. Before Okuda could ask anything, the artist started drawing. Okuda curiously watched over his shoulder and saw that he was drawing his idol actress. Ecstatic, Okuda threw away the other 2 portraits. If he had to choose, he would definitely choose his idol. He excitedly thanked the artist and walked away. A moment later, he remembered he had forgotten to pay, but after a brief hesitation, he decided to let it go. The next day, Okuda walked around with his idol's portrait, fantasizing about meeting her. He wondered where he might run into her and how she would react. He thought and walked for a long time, but there was no sign of his idol. He grew impatient, wondering if his idol would just fall from the sky. And then, his idol did indeed fall from the sky. A giant portrait of her fell and crushed Okuda flat. The story ends here. Perhaps if he had paid the strange man, his fate would have been different. The moral of the story: don't forget to pay. The 26th story begins with Yuji buying a diamond ring after saving for 3 months and proposing to his girlfriend. She was overjoyed and about to accept when a voice calling her interrupted the perfect moment. The girl immediately grabbed Yuji and ran, explaining that they could be killed if they were caught. It was then that she confessed to Yuji that her father was the head of a local gang. Her father had arranged a marriage for her, and today was the day the betrothal gifts were to be exchanged. She had snuck out to meet Yuji, but now her family had found her. She told Yuji they needed to leave immediately, but Yuji hesitated. His girlfriend questioned if he was betraying her and slapped him, warning that if he dared to betray her, she would kill him before her father did. Just as they were about to leave, her father's men caught up to them. Yuji couldn't escape. He was knocked out and taken away. When he awoke, he was in a basement with many people, including the girl and her father. Her father said he heard Yuji had been a great help to his daughter. Because she had missed the engagement ceremony, their organization had incurred a huge financial penalty. The man felt Yuji shared some of the blame for his daughter's mistake. However, the man asked if Yuji would swear to never contact his daughter again. As the room fell silent, Yuji's heart pounded with fear. He instinctively looked at the girl, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Yuji fell silent again. After a moment, he made his decision. He agreed to swear the oath. Seeing Yuji's cowardice, the man smiled. It was just as he had expected, but he wasn't going to let Yuji go just like that. He told Yuji there were 2 doors in front of him. One led outside, where he could return to his ordinary life and marry an ordinary woman. Behind the other door was a bomb. If Yuji chose that door, it would be his fate. The choice was his, and he had plenty of time to think. Yuji panicked. This meant he only had a 50% chance of survival. His legs gave out and he knelt, begging the man to let him go, but his pitiful display only angered the man, who knocked him out again. While unconscious, he remembered the day he first met the girl. It was in a coffee shop where he had shared a table with her and fell in love at first sight. When he woke up, he was alone in the basement. In front of him was a note written in lipstick telling him to choose the red door. He thought it must be his girlfriend who left it. With that thought, Yuji strode towards the red door. But just as he was about to open it, he hesitated. He remembered her threat that she would kill him before her father did if he betrayed her. He just betrayed her, and she is now telling him the wrong answer to get him killed. But then he remembered what she said in the car, that she only loved him and that he should find a chance to escape. He kept wondering if the note she left was real or a trap, and if he should trust her. If he chose wrong, he would die. If he didn't trust her, and her answer was real, he would also die. Yuji was torn, pacing back and forth between the 2 doors. Overwhelmed, Yuji felt a sense of despair. He desperately wanted to leave, but these 2 doors were his only way out. How could he possibly choose? He fell into a deep state of indecision, but after a moment, he had his answer. Although his girlfriend had threatened to kill him if he abandoned her, he remembered the scene of their first meeting. He chose to believe that she loved him and that her threat was just something said in anger. In the end, Yuji decided to trust her. He opened the red door. The story ends there without telling us a clear ending. The 27th story begins with Fujiko being a writer who loved staying at home. Her pet was a large lizard. One day, on the deadline for her manuscript, Fujiko rushed downstairs to find her car wouldn't start. With no other choice, she squeezed onto a bus to get to the publisher's office. As soon as she walked in, she was bumped into by an even more hurried woman named Yuki, who scattered Fujiko's belongings everywhere. Yuki ignored her and went straight upstairs. Fujiko was angry but had to submit her manuscript. After handing it in, her anger grew. She was told her serialized column would be temporarily suspended next month. In a fit of rage, Fujiko threw her manuscript on the floor. Just then, she saw Yuki again. Unlike her, Yuki seemed to be in a great mood, her business having clearly gone well. Upset, Fujiko decided to go to a pet store to buy a new pet. There, she saw Yuki again. Her desire for a pet vanished and she left. But while waiting at a red light, she saw Yuki again. Fujiko turned her head away, telling herself it must be a coincidence. But these coincidences became far too frequent. No matter where Fujiko went, she saw Yuki. These encounters became awkward for both of them, each feeling they were being followed by the other. Finally, at her wit's end, Fujiko decided to get some lunch. Halfway through her meal, she overheard women at a nearby table gossiping. They talked about a pathetic, gloomy woman who had been there on Saturday, a total shut-in type who would buy lizards at a pet store and even name them after her ex-boyfriend. Every detail hit home. Fujiko lost her appetite and got up to leave. As she did, she saw Yuki again. Fujiko instinctively turned away until Yuki was gone before leaving the restaurant. But things got stranger. Whether Fujiko went to the restroom, went shopping, or was on her way home, she saw Yuki. In contrast to Fujiko's fear, Yuki was furious. She started following Fujiko. When Fujiko sped up, Yuki sped up. When Fujiko ran, Yuki ran. Finally, Yuki cornered Fujiko in a stairwell. This finally set Fujiko off. She demanded to know what Yuki wanted. To her surprise, Yuki asked her the same question. The two of them ended up just repeating each other's words. During the confrontation, Fujiko accidentally fell down the stairs. Yuki slowly walked over and demanded to know why Fujiko was following her. Lying on the ground, Fujiko was even more confused. She thought Yuki had been following her. The story ends there. The 28th story begins with two brothers who were driving in the dead of night. As they passed a bar, the younger brother asked the older one to stop. He wanted to go somewhere with more people, and at this hour only a bar would be crowded. The older brother sighed and mumbled something about how much his brother liked people. He stopped talking, and following his brother's wish, they entered the bar. The moment they opened the door, the noisy bar fell silent. Everyone simultaneously turned to stare at the two brothers. Feeling uncomfortable under their gaze, they found a place to sit. When the waiter came over, the younger brother tried to order a glass of red wine, preferably rosé or even a cocktail. But the bar had none of those, and his request drew laughter from the other patrons, likely mocking him as an ignorant country bumpkin. The older brother, unable to stand it, ordered 2 beers and some snacks. The bar then returned to its previous noisy state. Meanwhile, a peculiar show was playing on the TV, discussing the mysteries of the human brain and paranormal phenomena. Some experts on the show argued that psychics probably didn't exist, and that even if they did, they would hinder scientific progress. The older brother watched this with disdain, remarking how people like that made things difficult. They didn't believe in psychic powers, yet acted so smug, spouting nonsense on TV. At that moment, a man appeared on the screen, dressed all in black with sunglasses. He held a spoon and, with just his mind, bent it. He was demonstrating his psychic abilities. To the others in the bar, this was clearly some kind of trick. The new topic was interesting, and as everyone drank more, their disbelief in psychic powers grew stronger. While a few in the crowd might have believed, most did not. They turned the subject into a joke, mocking it mercilessly and making many harsh comments. The older brother overheard this and became angry. The younger brother quickly tried to calm him down, but this only made the older brother more furious. He felt that he had suffered greatly because of these very powers, only to be dismissed as a fraud and a fool by the world. The next moment, the older brother's anger erupted, and the beer bottle in front of him shattered. The bar fell silent once again. All eyes were on him. They then watched as the plate of snacks in front of him levitated and crashed to the floor. The older brother was seething. The younger brother quickly helped him up, preparing to leave. As they reached the door, someone called out to them. The younger brother immediately apologized and offered to pay for the damages. But this angered someone else, who sneered about money not being able to solve everything. The older brother retorted that with scoundrels like them, there was no need for reason. He picked up a spoon, saying that people without imagination wouldn't believe it until they saw it with their own eyes. He then used his mental power to send the spoon flying into a woman's glass across the room. The entire bar was stunned into silence. The younger brother quickly paid and tried to leave again, but just as they reached the door, the woman accused him of being a fake, saying it was just a trick. Her words brought the older brother back. Everyone around him now seemed to agree it was just a trick, though they couldn't figure out how it was done. Seeing his brother about to lose control again, the younger one tried to restrain him. They prepared to leave once more. However, the woman continued to insult him. The older brother again used his mental power to shatter the glass next to her, but they dismissed it as a trick involving a thrown stone. This enraged him. He wanted to confront them, but his brother held him back. The younger brother looked at the bar owner, saying he knew the owner believed in psychic powers, so why didn't he speak up for them? The owner was shocked and asked if the younger brother could read minds. Just as the owner was about to explain, the woman interjected again, insisting it was a fake. The older brother, done with talking, grabbed his brother and had him touch the woman. In the next instant, the younger brother saw flashes of a compromising scene, and the man in it was not her husband. The younger brother then instinctively looked at the bar owner. Under the fierce glare of the owner's wife, the owner quickly changed his tune, declaring the brothers were frauds and telling them to get out. This was the last straw for the older brother. He unleashed his psychic powers, wreaking havoc in the bar. A few moments later, having calmed down, he prepared to leave with his brother. However, the woman threw something at them, telling them to get lost with their smelly butts. As the older brother turned, the woman cowered in a corner. Outside the bar, the older brother was full of regret, saying they should have stayed at the research institute and that nothing good ever came from escaping. The 29th story begins with May being struck by a severe headache on her way to work. She didn't know what was wrong, attributing it to work-related stress. But suddenly, she noticed that a man on the bus had a terrifyingly pale complexion, ashen like a corpse. At the time, May didn't think much of it, assuming he was just tired like her and that her own face must look just as bad. So the first thing she did upon arriving at the office was to check her reflection in the restroom mirror. She felt her complexion was acceptable. Her good mood was shattered, however, when a colleague appeared, chiding her for being slow and not having changed into her uniform yet. But looking closely, May saw that this colleague's face was also deathly pale, though not as frighteningly so as the man on the bus. May couldn't understand what was going on. During the day, May noticed her other colleagues seemed normal and didn't appear to notice the woman's poor complexion, or maybe they did and just didn't say anything. In any case, May tried not to dwell on it. While she was lost in thought, another colleague came over to gloat that she was about to go on a paid vacation. She teased May for being envious but unable to go since someone had to stay behind to cover the office, and that someone just happened to be May. That evening, May's mother mentioned they were going to visit her grandmother's grave the next day. Another year had passed so quickly, May mused. Her mother began to talk about her grandmother, saying that when she was alive she possessed a special ability. Unfortunately, her mother hadn't inherited it, only knowing it was some kind of predictive power, though she didn't know the specifics. Just then, May's father returned home, and they quickly changed the subject. While watching the news, May saw a report about a man who died in a car accident. Looking closer, she realized it was the same pale-faced man from the bus. The next day at work, May noticed her female colleague's complexion had worsened, approaching the same deathly pallor as the man who had died. To May's surprise, several other colleagues now had the same look. Still, she didn't think too much of it, assuming they had all coordinated their makeup, but she found the look deeply unsettling. Later, her boss asked her to deliver a document to the department head. When May entered his office, she was shocked to see his face was the same. She didn't understand what was happening until she heard the news at noon that the department head had died. Recalling what her mother had said about her grandmother's special ability, May suddenly wondered if the ability had skipped a generation and she had inherited it. Thinking back, it seemed to be the case. The two pale-faced people she had seen had both met untimely deaths, and it seemed only she could see it. Now, all the colleagues who were about to go on vacation had the same complexion. It seems like a sign that they would all die on the trip. May considered warning them, but how could she explain it? They would probably think she was just bitter and jealous. So in the end, she said nothing. That afternoon, she saw a male colleague rush back into the office. He brought terrible news. The plane they had been on had crashed, and there were no survivors. On her way home, May's mind was consumed by this. She was now certain that she could predict people's deaths. As she was thinking this, she noticed a young boy with the same pale face. May immediately approached him with concern, asking if he was sick or feeling unwell. When the boy shook his head, May quickly warned him to be careful of traffic. But then she saw a police officer watching her from a distance and realized her behavior was inappropriate. She reluctantly let the boy go. A moment later, she saw the boy start to run across the street, completely unaware of an oncoming truck. In a split second, May lunged, tackling the boy and pushing him to the ground. Once they were safe, she looked at the boy and saw his complexion had returned to normal. May was thrilled, overjoyed by her success, not knowing she had broken a taboo. A few days later, May was on her usual bus to work. But when she boarded, she saw that everyone on the bus had the same deathly pale face. A terrible premonition washed over her. She walked to the front of the bus and looked in the mirror. Just as she feared, her own face was the same. It meant the bus was going to crash, and she was going to die here. Realizing this, May immediately started yelling, telling everyone on the bus that they were about to have an accident. But no one believed her. She tried to stop the driver from moving, but it was too late. The story ends with May's chicken scream. The 30th story begins with Fatty, who was a bit of a ditz, but he had a very beautiful girlfriend. He also had a special hobby, growing potted plants. So for his birthday every year, his girlfriend would give him a new one. They even promised to do it for a lifetime. To capture the beautiful moment, they took a photo together. But when the photo was developed, Fatty suspected it was the wrong one. The two people in the picture resembled him and his girlfriend, but they were old and weathered. They couldn't understand what was going on and decided to let it go. That day, Fatty gave his girlfriend a beautiful necklace, which she happily put on immediately. The next day, Fatty noticed a change in the photo. The woman in the picture was now wearing the necklace. She hadn't been wearing it the night before. That evening, Fatty told his girlfriend about it and began to suspect that the people in the photo might be their future selves, with the matching necklace as proof. His girlfriend noticed that the flower in the photo was in bloom and that the couple in the picture was smiling, suggesting they would grow old together lovingly. Fatty, however, noticed something else. The background in the photo was shabby, indicating that their future would be one of poverty. This was unacceptable. Fatty had promised to give his girlfriend a happy life. From that day on, Fatty stopped being lazy and started working diligently. His change in behavior was noticed by his supervisor, and he quickly gained the boss's favor. As a result, Fatty saw that the background in the future photo had indeed changed for the better. His girlfriend remarked that it seemed they would be able to afford a luxury apartment soon. She noted how much Fatty had changed recently, and he credited it all to the photograph. She told him not to become a workaholic, saying she preferred his old, dorky self. Hard work did pay off, so Fatty continued to bury himself in his job. This meant he had less time to spend with his girlfriend. But the results were obvious. He was promoted to acting section chief, and the background in the photo became increasingly lavish. However, at some point, the couple in the photo stopped smiling. Fatty seemed completely oblivious to this, lost in the future depicted in the picture. Slowly, he changed. His temper grew shorter and his eye began to wander. Their future life might be better, but his girlfriend could no longer stand the person he was becoming now. She suggested that Fatty quit his job and they move back to the countryside. He refused, arguing that he was working so hard to give her a better life. While there was truth to his words, his original intentions had been corrupted. The day his girlfriend saw that the woman in the photo had changed, she knew it was time to break up with him. As she left, Fatty angrily threw the photo away, but his girlfriend picked it up as she went downstairs. A year passed. The section chief Fatty had aligned himself with lost a power struggle at the company, and as a result, Fatty was demoted to a post in the countryside. It happened to be his birthday, and he found himself thinking of his girlfriend. On his way back to his hometown, he passed a plant shop and felt a sudden urge to buy a flower. But as he approached the entrance, he saw his girlfriend. In that moment, Fatty felt a mix of embarrassment, guilt, and regret, and he wanted to cry. But then he heard her wish him a happy birthday. How could he have lost such a wonderful girlfriend? So, as they passed each other, Fatty finally cast aside his pride, grabbed her arm, and asked how she had been. She nodded emphatically. But after a moment, he let her go and bent down to pick up his things. As he did, they both saw the photograph on the ground. Looking at the ever-changing image in the photo, Fatty was overjoyed and excitedly asked her to get back together. The story ends there. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.